Hi, I'm Ethan Zuckerman with Global Voices, and I'm sorry I can't be with you there in London, but I'm happy to be with you virtually. I realize the title of this meeting is that some people think the internet is a bad thing. I'm not one of those people. I suspect that many of the people in the room there are also not one of those people. But I do think that the internet isn't all it could be. Back in the days when I got passionate about the internet, there were people like John Perry Barlow going around declaring cyberspace as its own sovereign territory. And one of their dreams at that point was that the net could emerge as a truly global space, where people from all around the world could interact on equal footing. It's a worthwhile dream, and I think it's one that we could still achieve, but we're far from it. There's a lot of barriers that prevent us from that dream. The cost of computing, the cost of connectivity, language barriers make it very, very difficult for people to participate in conversations. Cultural barriers keep us from listening in conversations a lot of the time. But the most shameful barriers are the barriers that governments are putting up to prevent people from speaking to one another. And this is becoming an epidemic. My friends over at the Open Net Initiative are now tracking internet filtering in at least 24 different countries, where those countries have decided that there's certain information on the internet that their citizens shouldn't access. In many cases, these countries aren't just blocking information, they're also blocking the tools of freedom of expression. In Pakistan and Ethiopia, we see blocks on blogger.com. We've seen blocks on tools like YouTube and Dailymotion in a number of different nations, including at one point Thailand and Tunisia. We see a block on LiveJournal in Morocco. These blocks don't actually stop people from using these tools, but they change how people use these tools, and they change how people think about themselves as they use these tools. An example of this is in Fiji, where bloggers have started becoming very critical of the military government that took power. As the government started feeling threatened by those bloggers, it started threatening to arrest suspected bloggers and threatened to block blogger.com. And those bloggers, to their great credit, didn't shut up. They wouldn't be silenced by it. Instead, they reached out to groups like Global Voices, groups like Electronic Frontier Foundation, figured out how to speak online in a way that they were able to hide their identities. And the government at this point has backed down, in part because of the international attention on it. Not everybody is willing to take a stand like that. Not everybody is willing to move from being an ordinary citizen to being an activist like that. A couple months ago, I was in Zimbabwe, and I was talking to the owner of an ISP. Zimbabwe, at that point, was getting very concerned about online speech. They tried to pass a regulation allowing them to monitor online speech. And they threatened to put plainclothes policemen in cyber cafes to monitor what people were saying online. This ISP owner was telling me that some of his customers were emailing him and asking to be removed from mailing lists because they were really afraid to be receiving anti-Mugabe jokes. The irony of this is that Zimbabwe can't afford to monitor the internet. They can barely pay their bandwidth bills. But just that threat of surveillance was enough to get a lot of people offline. I get a sense for just how dangerous speech can be working on Global Voices when our North Asia editor, Hao Wu, got arrested in February of 2006. He got detained by the Beijing police. And despite the fact that over 5 months he was never charged with a crime, so we don't know whether he was detained for his online speech or not, we do know that when he was released from prison, he wasn't blogging anymore. And his detention had very serious consequences for his whole family, especially for his sister, who found herself becoming a blog-based free speech advocate trying to agitate for her brother's release while he was in prison. She's now also under state scrutiny. Given the consequences of speaking online, it's amazing to me that some people are still willing to do it. My friend Alach Abdel Fattah spent 45 days in prison for participating in a pro-judiciary protest in Cairo. Jailing Alech didn't silence him. It actually gave him a broader voice. He actually started blogging from prison, writing notes, sending them to his wife, who posted them to his blog. But it's amazing to me that people are able to take this risk and are willing to take this risk to be heard. And it's my very strong sense that we have an obligation to listen to folks who are willing to take this risk to speak, not just to agitate for their right to speak, but to listen and to amplify the messages that they're getting out. So thanks very much for listening to me. I wish you all a great conference, and thanks for including me in the event.